Throughout our history, humanity has been extremely lucky to get this far. Taking into consideration how incredibly fortunate we have been in many ways, it's easy to come up with ideas for why we have not yet found intelligent life elsewhere in the universe. However, there have been multiple occasions when the human race as we know it was almost confronted with an apocalyptic situation. Coronal mass ejection 2012. As we all know, the world didn't actually end in 2012, as the Maya apparently predicted. However, the apocalypse was much closer than many of you think. In July of that year, an abnormally large ejection of plasma from the Sun occurred, tearing through the orbit of Earth at the exact place where the planet would have been just 9 days earlier. If this solar mass had hit the Earth directly, the damage to electronic equipment would have been catastrophic. It would have caused trillions of dollars of damage and easily taken upwards of a decade to fully recover from. In our current age, where we rely so much on technology in our everyday lives, something like this would be truly terrifying. False alarm 1983. In September 1983, the Soviet nuclear early warning system reported that the United States had launched multiple ballistic missiles, reportedly aiming directly at the USSR. As you can imagine, alarms began to sound, and computer systems at the time reported that 5 missiles were on their way. Stanislav Petrov, the duty officer at the base, himself declared that the warnings were a false alarm and disregarded his orders from higher ups. He stated that if an attack were to take place, hundreds of missiles would have been launched as opposed to 5. In this case, he was luckily right. Petrov prevented the Soviet Union retaliating that night, possibly saving the human race in the process. In the end, the false alarm was attributed to rare alignment of sunlight on high altitude clouds. The B-59 Submarine. At the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis, a lone Soviet submarine silently slid through the ocean. However, it was soon detected by US Navy ships patrolling the area. They then began about dropping small, grenade-sized depth charges as a signal for the B-59 to surface. However, unknown to the Americans, the B-59 was armed with a single nuclear torpedo, with quite possibly the destructive power equal to that of the Hiroshima atomic bomb. As the submarine was being rocked by small explosions left, right and centre, and the temperature inside had surpassed 38 degrees, all crew inside the submarine were desperate to surface, but certain they were under attack. The commanding officers of the submarine at the time argued as to whether to fire the torpedo. 3 votes were needed for the torpedo to be fired, and 1 person stood in the way of a nuclear war. Vasily Arkhipov, the second in command aboard, convinced the captain that they were not under attack at the time and had to surface. As Secretary McNamara later put it, nuclear war had come much closer than many people had thought. The moon nearly kills us all. In October of 1960, early warning radar bases located in Greenland started sending frantic alerts that a nuclear attack on the United States might be underway. As you can imagine, everyone in the military began to freak out, as details of the large-scale attack flowed in. The North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, went on high alert. This is when someone asked, why would the Soviet Union launch an attack when their leaders are in the US for talks? The reports were double-checked, and the rising moon was found to be the cause for this nearly world-ending misinterpretation. Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962. Around midnight in October 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis was at its peak. Nuclear-armed bombers were in the air at all times, and the world collectively held its breath and prayed for a peaceful conclusion to this terrifying ordeal. A lone guard at Duluth Air Base caught sight of a mysterious figure attempting to scale a fence. The guard shot a few times and activated the intruder alarm. However, at Volk Field Air Base, the wrong alarm rang, and it happened to be the alarm that signalled the beginning of World War III. Pilots were immediately scrambled and began lining up their fighters and nuclear-armed bombers on the runway. They were seconds away from taking off and delivering atomic devastation to Russian soil. Then a truck came racing down the runway towards them. It was frantically flashing its lights in a desperate attempt to inform the pilots of the false alarm. So what was the shadowy figure that nearly started this apocalyptic chain reaction? Well, it turns out it was actually a confused bear.